It's not about looking good, it's about being good. It's not what you say, it's what you do that matters most. It's about having the courage to step into your arena and do the work. Welcome to No Show Dogs, powered by ReliaQuest. Hey, welcome back to the No Show Dogs podcast, powered by ReliaQuest. My name's Derin McMains. I'm ReliaQuest Director of Mental Performance. I'm alongside our most frequent guest, our founder and CEO here at ReliaQuest, Brian Murphy. Murph, how are you, sir?
D-Mac, I'm great. Good to be with you. Happy New Year.
Hey, yeah, Happy New Year. And I got to ask, it's been a few months since you've been on here. How's golf going, man? How's the handicap? Is it getting lower? Where are we at on that, man?
You know, man, it's not. It's been up and down. You know, I've improved some parts of the game, which makes other parts of the game more complicated, right? So when you start to dial in and you can get the ball off the tee cleaner, and you get some of your fairway irons dialed in, then you just got to get better around the green, right? You put yourself in different putting positions, and so consistency is still a problem. Just trying to dial it in, but what you focus on is what you get. So that's my one of my goals for 2024 is to keep up with the grind, and really to get that swing consistent enough throughout the round. I find myself, oddly enough, talking about mindset, is just losing focus. It's so easy. I don't normally think about one thing for 4 hours. And what's made me good at what I do, I think, is being able to work through multiple things at one time. And when you get out on the golf course, you just can't do that. Like, right. You got to be in the moment and focused, and that's not a normal motion for me. So that's been a huge struggle, but it's also the thing that I think is the most relaxing about the sport for me. It's why I like the challenge, because it is probably one of the more difficult mental challenges I've had to do, because I've just built this capability over 17 years of building ReliaQuest to just be multiple and as multiple as possible. And man, my mind wanders like a typewriter cartridge going across the typewriter out there. So I just got to sling that thing back before every shot. So trying to figure that one out.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's been fun to kind of watch you on your golf journey right before we jump into this.
It's not fun to watch. Well, I'll tell you that. It's pretty ugly.
Well, it's fun to hear you talk about it, because then in any skill development, anything that we go through, we make a ton of improvement right away, right? Like early on, I know how excited you were. Like, oh man, handicap's all the way down to 18. Let's go, right? And then now kind of like plateaued for a bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
But in anything that you do, the beauty is in how well you navigate the plateau. Like, can you stay consistent through the plateau? Because, that's life, right? That's business, that's sport, whatever it is. Like, most of your life is going to be spent on the plateau, and that's why consistency is so important, because you got to grind through that so you can get those micro improvements along the way. But it is learning to love the plateau.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I've got plenty of. I've been plateaued long enough. I got to learn to love it. There's no other choice. So.
That's right. Well, hey, today I want to talk about a little bit different, a different idea around failing and the importance of that, and how that leads to new standards, new ways of doing things. 'Cause I think what happens sometimes is when whether it's coaches, athletes, business professionals, entrepreneurs, specifically in this example, I think people could potentially see what you've been able to build here at ReliaQuest, and maybe think, oh, it's been perfect the whole time. Like, look at this guy. He's been just crushing it, right? And I think what happens a lot of times is, whether it's the fear of failure, or what I think potentially sometimes holds people back more is the fear of what other people will say about their failure, right? Is like what that can paralyze people, right? But the importance of, no, you got to go for it. You got to risk. You got to step outside your comfort zone. You got to do some things that you've never done before. And if you fail, that's okay, because that's where you learn and grow. And so today I want to talk a little bit about how that experience has been for you, where a failure you've had, or a couple that you've had that have led to some never agains, right? So it's like, share a story or two around what's a specific thing that you went for, you thought it was the right thing to do, failed at it, but the beauty of it was on the other side, it led to a never again, or it led to a standard, something that has been set that has allowed you to have more success going forward.
It's interesting. It's hard for me to think about ReliaQuest and what we've built as being big and great, and I don't have that outside in view, so it's really hard for me to even hear that, because I just remember the journey along the way of all the things I've screwed up along the way and all the mistakes that I've made. So it's not perfect in my mind. So when I look at it, you tend to see flaws, right? Because you do have those. Somebody once, a mentor of mine, Phil Moyer, still with us. We have an award we give out with his name on it, but he gave me this story that his grandfather sent him out and told him to fix the fence, and he got so angry that he just nailed a bunch of nails in the fence, and his grandfather came out and said, well, now you need to pull all the nails that you didn't need out. And his grandfather said, Phil, look at the fence. You can pull all the nails out when you're done, but the holes are still there. So, and that's kind of how I think about building the business, is the things that happen and the punches that you take, the mistakes that you make with, maybe how you treat people or how you respond to situations, errors, risk you don't take, right? I regret the things I didn't do far more than the things that I did, or the things that you don't say sometimes. And so those holes still exist. So it's really hard to look at the business and not see all of that. So it's even hard for me to hear that. And I know I think you'd probably find that with anybody that's built something or done something. They don't really want to talk about the thing because the thing took a lot, right? There's a lot wrapped up in the ability to go from zero to, thousands of people and billions of dollars, right? So that's you can't even. I did it and I can't wrap my mind around it, right? So it's a strange thing. I'd say if I had to bucket it, I'll tell you though, sometimes the fear of like what people are going to think paralyzes you, but oftentimes what people think drives you. And I think that is a great motivator, whether it's, my dad wrote me an email. The company was open for all of 10 days and just wrote me in his words like what that meant and how he's always thought of me. I still have it framed. It's in my room. When you cut the cord, move away from cable, you lose that email. So that was years ago. But so I just have that framed in the room. And then when people think you can't do it, a lot of times we think about sports or competitive anything, and you hear that, well, this team talked trash the week of the game and we hung it in the bulletin board and that motivated the whole team. Well, the same thing works in business. I mean, that's, so I've got a whole bulletin board full of stuff and I look for new things. Like I need that. Like I need people taking shots at us. I need like, you almost invent things like, oh, they don't think I can do it. Right. And so I'd say that's just as powerful as the fear of what people are going to think of you if you fail. I think early on, I was probably the biggest fear is just not surviving the business, right? I mean, we were started in 2007. In 2008, the world's ending. I had a payroll at that time, 7 employees. I'm cash advancing credit cards. If you watch the news, everybody around me, people that cared about me were telling me to shut it down, wait till the economy comes back, start over. That was that fear of like having to go home and tell Renee like, hey, I can't do this. And we're just gonna have to eat all of these losses. And then, hey dad, I sorry about that. I appreciate that email, but it's over. That pain, like that not wanting to have that conversation was more powerful than what anybody else would think about me. So I think that helped a lot in a lot of ways shape where I am now. Like if you're not in my arena, you're not someone that's fighting next to me to build something, you're not trying to solve the problem that we solve, then I really am not concerned with your opinion. And not that it doesn't bother me, right?
Yeah, right.
But you do start to compartmentalize like what you listen to and what you don't. But I've made, so many mistakes around, I think hiring is always a mistake you make. Wrong person at the wrong size of company or holding on to something too long, or what I like to call hiring fatigue, recruiting fatigue. So you need to get a position filled. You've grown to a certain level. You need the role. You're interviewing people. They're not a fit. You're moving through candidates. A lot of times you're using a third-party agency. No offense to, headhunters and recruiters out there, whether you're the best retained search firm or the recruiter, your job is to get somebody to say yes and a company to hire them. And so you have everybody pushing you hire. and you just start to get burnt out if it's taken a while, and you end up hiring somebody, and you know when you hire that person, it's not the right fit for them, it's not the right fit for you. It could be wrong company size, wrong fit, wrong background, wrong geo, wrong mindset, whatever. Those are always the most painful because you pay for that fatigue. There's that saying that fatigue makes cowards of us all. You pay for that fatigue for 6, 12, 18 months in a lot of ways, right? It impacts your teams and impacts your performance. And so, I've made that mistake a couple of times. I've made a hire that I think probably set us back 12 months. I mean, it probably cost us, at one point, maybe $100 million in valuation. I mean, it's a big number. Now, that only hurts you if you stop, right? We've grown through that. Doesn't matter now. We learn, but that's a lot of tuition to pay over a couple of bad hires. Yeah.
So with those failures in hiring fatigue, right? Like, what have you put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again? Like, what's the never again is it just like a mindset of like, hey, we're not gonna do this, or have you put in place certain standards? What have you done to make sure that doesn't happen again?
It's focus. It's less about the resume. Everybody can tout like the team they've been on, the companies they work for, the quote unquote experience. But like our last podcast, when you were talking about, I think the guest was talking about really the skills, right? The skills and the mindset over the resume. And I completely agree with that. I also say block out outside noise. Like, don't allow the fatigue to happen. Yeah. So whether it's a board member, an investor, a recruiter, anyone that wants you to get something hired, you got to block that out because they're not the ones that are going to have to deliver the result, right? And so I really focus on who am I listening to, and it's the team that's going to have to deliver the result. And so it's the people in the arena that are doing the work day to day. And really, if they're not feeling a candidate, if they're not feeling something, you never do it. And I've just learned that it's way more painful to fill somebody with the wrong person. It's bad for that person too, right? It's not good for them. And so it's that discipline of blocking out external noise and then not allowing yourself to kind of cheat away from what you need, right? And you and I have had conversations around just how hard recruiting is, even in the NFL and some of the best, right? They're very seldom are they successful.
Right. So. Yeah. I mean, you look at a lot of the data out there that some people have done great work on, from where scouts are grading players, A all the way down through M, and then what's the success rate of them and how, what's the success rate of those players when they get to their free agent year. And what we've seen is, they're right at the most 58% of the time, which is crazy when you think about how much money the NFL spends, right, to get those right. And that's not a knock on scouts because they're best in the world at what they do. That's just an indication of how hard it really is and the importance of coaching on the backside and mindset, like who's coming in that, is highly self-aware and has the discipline and the work ethic to put in the work and buy in and believe in the schemes that the team's putting forward. So, for sure around hiring, I can tell you early on in my coaching career, when I say early on, meaning my very first year as a professional baseball coach, I had a epic failure that led to a never again. I'll give you the background. We're in the playoffs, best of 5 series, tied 1 game apiece. Game 3 is generally a huge pivotal game, ends up determining largely who's going to ultimately win the series. We're up 9-2 in the 5th. We blow it. We lose 11-10, and we're at home. Like, I don't know what the win probability was in the 5th, but I'm telling you, in a professional baseball game, if you're up 9-2 in the 5th, you should never lose that game, right? So, first-year coach, I'm a mess. I'm upset. It was my first time really experiencing that I felt like I had no impact on the game, right? Always as a player, you're like, hey, things are getting out of hand. That's okay. You're in the dugout. You're talking with the guys. You go out, you make a play. You have a good at bat, whatever it might be. You feel like you can contribute and kind of turn things around. Anyway, we get to the end of the game. We lose. I'm picking up stuff with the bat boy around the dugout, making sure stuff's, put up so we can go into the clubhouse, do our thing, wallow in self-pity and figure out how to win the next day. But my wife and my son and she's carrying my son. My wife, my son's like 1 at the time. She's coming down the stadium stairwell there. I see her coming down. And I'm going to tell her like, hey, it's going to be a little bit, tough loss. We only had 1 vehicle at the time. So, she always had to wait on me after the game. So as I'm telling her, hey, just wait on me, a fan comes up and just starts yelling at me and telling me how terrible our team was. We blew it, how terrible I was. And I lost it on this guy. lost it. Ultimately told him, hey, I'll meet you in 20 minutes out in front of the gate here, and we're going to settle it out. And I even said, like, we'll scrape gravel. Let's go, right? And
there's a clock out there. It's high noon.
It was late at night in Salem, Oregon. But I remember the look on my wife's face, right? She covers my son's ears and runs off. And, I'm upset, obviously. Anyway, fortunately, we didn't fight. That would have ended my coaching career. So glad that didn't. I'm glad he went home, so he wasn't there. But what he did do is he sent an email to the owner of the minor league team. Of course he would, right? It makes it all its way up to San Francisco, and I get reprimanded for that, like I should have. Had to issue a apology, do the whole thing, right? But I was embarrassed, unbelievably embarrassed about myself. And it was in that moment I had to decide, like, what type of coach do I want to be, right? Because we say this all the time. You can't control what happens to you, but you are always in control of how you respond to what happens to you, right? And if you don't want to respond that way, choose a different response. Well, to choose means you got to have options. And at that point in my coaching career, I hadn't decided what type of coach I want to be known as. I haven't decided what I want the players to think about me as their leader. I hadn't decided that yet. And since I hadn't decided that yet, what I felt in that moment was anger. And that's how I responded, because I didn't have another option, right? And so for me, that was an epic failure that, hey, I had to go back, do some work on myself and figure out, again, what are my core values? What do I want to be known as? And that's why I know some people think like, oh, that's soft or whatever it is, but not until you decide how do you want to show up every day, not until you decide how you want to lead, not until you decide what your legacy or decide how you want your people that you get to serve and lead want to see you as, not until you decide that, will you ever have something that guides you past the emotions that you feel in the moment. And so that's why it's so important to make those decisions, because that now, when you get in that moment, when you start getting squeezed, we talk about this all the time. It's like, what happens when you squeeze an orange? Do you get apple juice? Nope.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you get grapefruit juice? No. What do you get? You get orange juice, right? Why? Because that's what's on the inside, right? And so it's like, I got to decide how I want to show up before. So when something happens that starts to squeeze me, it starts to get hard, what am I going to do? Well, now that I have a decision, or now that I've made a commitment that said, hey, I don't want to be the guy that just responds in anger. I want to be a leader that's cool, calm, and collected under pressure. Now that person comes up to me. You say whatever you want. I made a decision at that point once I established those core values. I will never let somebody outside of the arena.
But it doesn't mean it doesn't make you mad.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
oh, for
that's
sure.
The thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because the people think you're all zen and it stays with you. You're going to remember it. You put it on the list.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I keep receipts. I definitely keep receipts. But now I have a choice, and I say, got it. And just walk off, right? Because I'm not going to let anybody outside of the arena, just as you mentioned earlier, I'm not going to let people outside of the arena impact how I lead and perform inside this arena. Not going to happen, right? And so that was, for me, I'm embarrassed that I went through it, but at the same time, it forced me into a place that I've created a standard and a way that I do things that has allowed me just to be more, hopefully, cool, calm, and collected in those types of moments, No Show Dogs is brought to you by ReliaQuest. ReliaQuest is a global leader in cybersecurity, working with the largest organizations around the world to manage cyber risk. Through our technology and our high-performance company mindset, we continuously work to get a little better as we make security possible. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com. And I'm sure you've had other things, maybe not like that, but other failures along the way that have led to some standards that you've created.
Yeah, I think there's been so many things, like tactically just growing the business, but I think a lot of things is just learning where to apply time, like where to apply effort, again, what to listen to, what to block out. I think that reaction is the right thing, of just knowing that, as the company gets bigger, that interaction with me might be the only interaction somebody has in 6 months or 90 days, or it might be a year if they're based in another location, right? This just gets to be big. And so making sure that you're listening, you're taking things in, you're not allowing what happened in the last 3 meetings, the last whatever is weighing on you, like that person, that fan telling you off. You can't take that in the locker room and vent it out on the pitcher that's going through something, right? And so compartmentalizing how you manage that at home, right? And just making sure you kind of have a system to turn things on and off. But there's been so many mistakes over the years that I've made of not moving fast enough on something. One thing that, I think we've done well is to not chase trends. And some of the biggest mistakes I've made is just not shutting down like the need to chase a trend faster, right? And so as you evolve the business, there's this kind of push and pull, right? This kind of almost tug of war in a sense that goes on. When we started moving into cybersecurity, I mean, no one stored data in a cloud. There wasn't a Microsoft 365 or Google or Amazon. Like, it just didn't exist, right? And so as data began to move, it was really when you allow moves, big strategic shifts in the business, you have to make sure everybody comes along with those, right? And so there's mistakes that I've made along the way where I've allowed groups or factions to kind of stay the old way too long and not buy in, right? You may not believe in it, right? But you gotta buy in. And so we have this kind of 60% and go. And this is where this comes from, there was a time where we were moving to more platform the business, and data was moving, and without getting too technical, we needed to be able to detect, investigate, and respond regardless of where that data sits. So if it's an old financial institution, everything's on-prem, we need to be there. If it's in multiple clouds, we need to be there. And this is over the course of 2013, 14, 15, 16. So as new technologies are come out, we have to respond. And I just started to see the company that wanted to really hold on to the old way, right? And it wasn't that these people weren't innovative or they didn't care about the company. It's just they liked the company and they didn't want it to change, and we fear change, right? And so I didn't acknowledge that fast enough. And then you had some team that are always kind of front running, and they can get a little bit over their skis. And so really what allowed me to look at what took us 12 months, it should have taken us 2 months, right? And we almost missed an innovation window. And in our world, if you miss 1 to 2 innovation cycles, you're done, right? So you can't miss an innovation cycle, especially in cybersecurity, because things move so fast. And so it's really bringing everybody together and just having a healthy debate. But my dad used to always say growing up, like, hey, we may argue in this house, we're going to debate things in this house, but when we decide as a family, when you walk out that front door, that's the decision, right? And so really bringing that old kind of Bob Murphy saying into our team meetings, and like, we're going to get to 60% consensus, but when we walk out of this room, there'll be 100% buy-in, and making that really clear to everybody in the room that it's okay if you are part of the 40% that doesn't agree. When we walk out and we got that 60%, it's time to go. And if you can't buy in and be a part of that 100%, you can't be on the team. And being that black and white with things, because ultimately, and there's some decisions have been made, have been a mistake. We've built technology that we just scrapped and shelved that we never used. It was a 60% consensus. We were 100% buy-in. But because you buy in and you go at it with everything you have, when you fail, you're going to fail faster, right? And you're going to get there quicker. And so you buy yourself time to pivot again, and you're going to learn from that failure, especially in technology. Like, it's going to break, you're going to build it, it's going to break again. But if you're battling both how difficult that evolution of failure in technology is, and you're battling different factions of a team that are somewhat bought in, not bought in, you can't really measure what that tech is. Is it the tech failing, or is it the team? Is it infighting? And so we just remove that variable out. And that's one thing that we learned along the way that almost cost us, pretty greatly early on, of just not getting that 100% buy-in. And we've had to make some tough decisions, right? I believe if you stand in the middle of the road, the only thing you get is hit by both sides of traffic. So I want somebody to pick a side, like have an opinion. And if you can't have an opinion, then you're in the wrong room. So that's something that cost us a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of tech debt along the way, but we worked our way through it, and it really came down to behavior.
Yeah. And is that where your I mean, belief really. I mean, it's just who you are. But is that why you are so focused on mindset, right? Of like, because that has everything to do with attitude, right? Buy-in has everything to do with attitude, and it's like, were they mistakes early on where you saw it and you're like, yeah, I'm doubling down, I'm tripling down. This is just who we are, right? It is all about mindset. Or was that just something that you already brought to the business? I'm just curious.
I think early on, it's funny, early on when we were, first hiring, I don't think we put enough emphasis on, you wanted to hire talent and you didn't think about mindset enough, right? And then you start to see how mindset matters, even more so than talent. There's a lot of talented people in the world, but if they just don't, if they don't want to apply effort, if they don't approach things with an open mind, it's going to kill the rest of the people on the team. And so we learned to kind of look more for that attitude, energy, and effort than we do for. I don't really care if you went to Harvard or MIT or you had a 4.0 or you were this. Like, there's a lot of smart and talented people that can't get out of their own way. So I want to measure is, are you willing to be a part of a team? Yeah. Are you willing to commit to something larger than yourself? So if you're an I person where you're just trying to, and it's okay if people are managing their career, but you can clearly see whether somebody's just trying to figure out what's best for them for the next 2 years, or someone that wants to be a part of something, somebody that's like fascinated by the talented people that work with them. Like, I want that. Cybersecurity is a team sport. Like, we need people that want to work together and that can appreciate the talent somebody else has and that let that motivate them. And I think for us, mindset was when we started to grow and you get up around 50 people, 75, 100, 125, how do we make the approach, our values, repeatable? And mindset came in when when we say be accountable, how do we make that repeatable across the organization, right? Well, then we got to quit talking about a culture. Or we have a culture of accountability. It's on our website. Great. Like, what you say once means you never said it, right? And so mindset became like, how do we actively ingrain this in everything that we do, be a values-based decision-making organization, right? And so as we scaled, and I felt like we had a little wobble. You have to have a feel for the business, and I've always had a good feel for the business around what I would call the mindset, like our approach and how we respond to the things that happen, and then the pace. Like, because we've talked about before, if you're afraid to lose, you can't win. Right. And I kind of look at like what if and if only, before you make the decision, all the what ifs come out. Well, what if someone laughs at me? What if we make a mistake? What if this damages the business? What if I look foolish? What if this? If the what if freezes you and keeps you from moving, then you got to deal with the if only. Man, if only I'd made that decision. If only I'd taken that chance. If only so, I looked at going back to the early days of ReliaQuest, the going to Renee and my father and others and saying I failed was way heavier than those what ifs like that. And I never wanted to live with the if only later, right? And look back on it. And, luck's undefeated, had a lot of things go our way, and it's, we still got a lot of work to do. But that's kind of how I think about mindset. And now when you're building the organization, how do you build that into every layer of the company? And how do you drive ownership from, the top of the organization down? Because anymore, I can't impact things the way I used to, right? So now it's got to be kind of self-sustainable and repeatable.
Yeah, that's really good. It's been said, anybody can learn from their own mistakes, but someone that has wisdom or wise people learn from the mistakes of others, right? And so, that's part of the reason why we do the No Show Dogs podcast, right? It's like, hey, let's just share some principles, things we've learned along the way in hopes to help other business leaders and entrepreneurs along the way in their journey, and they can maybe avoid some mistakes going forward, right? How can we learn from other high performers in other industries? So with that being said, and kind of as we wrap up here, one of two ways you can take it. One would be, what's something that you learned from a brother or maybe a mentor, something that you saw along the way, you're like, yeah, okay, that mistake, I'm not going to make that here. Thank you for sharing that, right? Or maybe, and if you could boil it down to one thing, right? Like, I'm thinking about the leader listening to this right now, the entrepreneur listening to this right now, where it's like, hey, what is one thing that, Murph, you would tell them? Say, hey, don't make this mistake. This is one you really want to avoid. Let's just wrap up with that.
Well, a quick one is I'm the youngest of 3 boys, so I'm 7, 8 years younger than my brother. So don't talk back to mom at the dinner table. Just don't. It never ends well.
Agreed.
So that was a quick one. Consequence, you can learn that. I like to learn that through others. I don't have to be in jail to know I don't want to be there, right?
Sure.
But I'd say in business, like it just comes back, and this may sound just too simple, but simple things are seldom easy. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And there have been times where a trend has popped up. I can remember 2012, we were a really small company. I'm sitting with a person at the time. We're at an HP security event. And there's another vendor there that's a partner with HP, and he's going on and on and on about how all in he is on one piece of tech, and I'd be foolish not to do it. And his approach wasn't the greatest. It's not my style. It just didn't feel right. I can remember listening to him. I'm like, I don't know that I agree. I haven't built what you've built. I can barely make payroll. There's only 20 of us. That just doesn't seem right? And it wasn't, and we didn't do it. And so it's talked about too much of trust your gut, but listen to the things that don't feel right. Like if you're in an interview, like don't look over a thing that, I didn't really love that, but, right?
Right. Yeah.
Pay attention to what's before and after the but and the ands, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'd say, like, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. That's what I've learned over the years.
Yeah, that's dynamite, right? And that is, I think, for any of us, I always say we're our best salespeople, right? I can talk myself in or out of anything. In fact, everything I've ever purchased in my life, I've talked myself into it, right?
Oh, yeah. Some things easier than others. Of course I need that piece of pizza.
Totally,
right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, no, Murph, I appreciate you taking the time, and as always, and sharing wisdom along the way. And just for, people that are listening, it's like, it is in those mistakes is when we grow most, right? And it is in those times where we think, oh, shoot, is this ever going to end? Or I can't believe I did that. But it's like, hey, why did you do that? And then what's the adjustment you need to make? Like I hear people say this a lot, like, I'll never make that mistake again. Great. But what are you doing specifically? What are you putting in place to never do that thing again, right? And it's like, that was the thing I learned early on as a coach, where it's like, I was never going to do that again. Okay, well then what do I need to do? Well, now I got to go do some work on myself and figure out why the heck I did that, and then establish, right, who I want to become. And so anyway, that's what I would encourage everyone out there. It's like, it's not just about never making that mistake again. It's about taking that next hard step and going, hey, what's the change? What's the mindset change? What's the behavior change? What's the change you need to make sure that failure becomes an actual never again, so you can actually grow and get better going forward.
Yeah, you're taking classes, you're paying tuition. Just don't take that class twice.
Yeah. Simplest way to say it. Thank you. Hey, as always, thanks for tuning in to No Show Dogs, powered by ReliaQuest, and go out and make it a great day. Thanks.
Appreciate you, D-Mac.
Yeah, you got it.